to provide services and programs on a very limited budget. We know that. The government knows that. But yet nothing's being done. Some of that $68 million could have very well been set aside for that sort of those sorts of programs. Also, we have in Child Protection Services, we have a report that came forward, Mr. Speaker, called Workload Caseload Overload. And Mr. Speaker, it demonstrated to this government just how much the social workers are overloaded with the number of clients that they have, the responsibility that they have to paperwork, to prepare for each and every one of those clients, the visitation of those client services. They can't possibly meet any of those demands, and yet government has done nothing with respect to this report, nor have they set any money aside for hiring additional social workers, particularly in Child Protection Division. So, Mr. Speaker, there's a number of areas in which this Financial Measures Act hasn't addressed. That in itself, Mr. Speaker, is one. But I do want to come back to the $155, Mr. Speaker, because the $155 is something that is extremely is an issue that's extremely dear to my heart. It's an issue that says that government demonstrates the direction and where it's going to go. It's going to make sure that those most affluent will benefit from the spoils of government, and those less fortunate will have to fend more for themselves than ever before. And Mr. Speaker, if we don't believe that that's the case, all we have to do is remember the report from the National Council of Welfare and Welfare Incomes in Nova Scotia in 2002. And that report says that those people on social assistance, income assistance in this province, have been worse off under this government in the last 4 years than ever before. And it's consistently dropping. And this government is very much aware, because we know that there's increases to the food banks, and some of the constituent members, or many of the constituent members, Mr. Speaker, have food banks in their constituency. Rather than declining in prosperity in this province, they're actually increasing. They can't meet the demands of the community out there. As a matter of fact, we have moved not only from food banks, we have moved the clothing depots to furniture depots. We have moved in a direction where Nova Scotians, the most vulnerable Nova Scotians and the poorest Nova Scotians, are not benefiting from a balanced budget in this province. We can continue to go down this direction, Mr. Speaker, but the costs will continue to surmount as well. The government may be able to show on the books that it's doing a balanced job, but what about the human deficit, the deficit in providing services and programs to those individuals whom we are responsible for making sure that they have a better quality of life in our society? They're the ones that the members of the opposition are going to have to meet on the doorstep, Mr. Speaker. They're the ones, those 300,000 Nova Scotians who you won't escape, those 300,000 Nova Scotians who will know that there is no check coming in the mail to them. And I don't care what constituency you represent, whether you represent an affluent constituency or not. There will be those in your constituency who will recognize that they're not going to be the benefactor of the spoils of government and a balanced budget. It's those individuals whom I stand in this legislature for, Mr. Speaker. It's those individuals who need the voice, and it's unfortunate that I'm not on the government side of the floor today, but there will certainly come a time when we will be on the government side of the floor, and we will introduce policies that will make sure that all Nova Scotians and Nova Scotia today's families benefit from a balanced budget and a surplus. not just simply those who will spend the money outside this province and who will spend this money on items that will mean absolutely nothing to those poor Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that when we look at how the budget has been crafted, we need to say, and we need to constantly remind the government that it's important that all Nova Scotians benefit from this $155 rebate or refund called the Nova Scotia Taxpayers Refund. It's going to come to them. We also need to know that the Nova Scotians after the year 2004 who will receive the 10% tax cut, will there be those individuals will not benefit from that 10% tax cut. So if you're earning $100,000 a year, Mr. Speaker, under this 10% tax cut, you'll be able to walk away with $10,000. $10,000 in which you'll be able to spend wherever you and however you want. If you earn $10,000 as an income, you'll walk away with $1,000. A significant difference. But there will be many, many Nova Scotians, and there will be 300 Nova Scotians who will not receive any break as a result of that 10% tax cut. And Mr. Speaker, we need to know how government determines or sets criteria for how it decides to spend the taxpayer surpluses. And I believe that all the taxpayers must benefit from this surplus. Those individuals who go out there and have to pay for children's clothing, children's medication, those people who have, those seniors who have to pay for home heating fuels, long-term care, those individuals who have to pay for auto insurance. All of those could get a tax rebate through the HST by a reduction in the HST. That's how this could happen, Mr. Speaker. And this government has a role and responsibility to make sure that everyone benefits from those dollars. Mr. Speaker, I know that there's no budget item within the Financial Measures Act with respect to the Capital Regional Transportation Authority. But I do know that it is something that has been, it is a committee that's been spoken about in the speech from the throne, but yet no budget item has been placed on it. And the Capital Transportation Authority is something that's of keen interest to me, what this structure will look like, what the makeup will be, if in fact it will dissolve the Halifax Dartmouth Bridge Commission, and if in fact how much money is going to be set aside, what kind of input the provincial government is going to have, or if there's going to be a joint, this is going to be a joint committee with the province of Nova Scotia and the Halifax Regional Municipality, because this Capital Transportation Authority, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, is probably to deal with a myriad of transportation issues within the metropolitan area. One area in particular which is a concern to me is, in fact, the expansion and the growth of the Burnside Industrial Park, and the need, Mr. Speaker, to have an appropriate transportation system because of the population in that surrounding area. Also, the accesses to the A. Murray McKay Bridge. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say to you, we need to know what direction this government is going with respect to the Capital Regional Transportation Authority, and how much money the government is going to allocate, if any, to that Capital Regional Transportation Authority. I know that most recently I've been trying to find out just exactly what's going to happen, but there has been no way of finding out, because the minister responsible for that says that there's still ongoing discussions. We haven't decided the structure of how this is going to work, and in time that will come out. Well, I certainly want to be able to know, Mr. Speaker, because it's important to know as a result of my conversation over a year ago with the then former minister and the chairman of the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission and the general manager, of wanting to have some responsibility of whose role it is to maintain the street networks to the gateway of the city of Dartmouth, which comes to the A. Mary McKay Bridge, is significantly important. I need to know where that's going to stand in the future and how that's going to be funded and who's going to be responsible for it. Also, Mr. Speaker, although not in the budget, there had been some talk about Burnside, the extension of Burnside Drive into Sackville, and that it might very well be a tolled highway. And if that's the case, that it might very well be a tolled highway, Mr. Speaker, I have some concerns. Because not only do the people from Sackville, Truro, the Eastern Shore, Porters Lake, Musquodoboit, and the surrounding area, Bedford and the surrounding area, are not only are they employed there, but now they will be expected to pay a toll to come to their place of employment. And I'm certainly hoping, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't happen. I'm certainly hoping that under the Capital Regional Transportation Authority, that the minister has, if in fact, Mr. Speaker, the government is going to set some money aside, then we have to know how that money is going to be spent and where it's going to be spent. And if in fact HRM is obligated to put dollars in as well. Since this is going to be a joint venture from my understanding, although the details haven't been out yet, then we need to know. We need to know if in fact those kind of things are going to happen. It's a very serious issue, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Victoria Road, the Bedford Highway, going between Dartmouth and Bedford, and the traffic jams that are there now as a result of people trying to move out during rush hours. Many people spend a half an hour to 45 minutes during those rush hour traffics and even longer, trying to get to Sackville, to Bedford, and even to the inner city of Halifax and Dartmouth, as a result of the lack of highway improvements in that area. All you need to do is take a drive over there, Mr. Speaker, and you certainly would know. Hopefully, within the Financial Measures Act and which deals with the budgets of this legislative assembly, that we would certainly see that in fact this government is moving in the right direction and moving in the direction to address that. It's an important issue because it's long overdue with respect to how to address the transportation problems within the metropolitan area. And simply because of the constituency that I represent in Dartmouth North, there is a tremendous need to develop a traffic pattern that's going to ease the pressures off of the residential communities that surround the Burnside Industrial Park and the harbor-oriented activities along the Windmill Road. So to me, Mr. Speaker, and to the residents that I represent, it's extremely important to know just exactly what the Capital Regional Transportation Authority's role is going to be. Certainly hope it's a role of one that's going to be positive. Certainly hope that it's a role of one that the government is going to play an important role, and I mean the provincial government is going to play an important role and not just simply leave it totally to the municipality and ask the municipality to fund it, yet set up the organization. We need to make sure that that's in place, and if that's not in place, Mr. Speaker, then we're going to be in trouble. Although it's important that the government doesn't say that when this committee is going to come forward and when it's going to be formed as well, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about the issue of housing as well, Mr. Speaker. The Financial Measures Act deals with each and every budget within the Legislative Assembly, and the Department of Housing Services is no different. And the Department of Housing Services, Mr. Speaker, has not spent any money on housing since 1993 in this province. with the exception, as I've said before and I'll say again, the 15-unit complex that's being built in Middleton, and a contribution to the homeless units that were built on the corner of Garish and Gottingen. And Mr. Speaker, that's been the extent of this government's involvement in housing. There's some 1,300 people in the Metro Housing Authority has on a list waiting for housing. And unless those 1,300 people get housing, the problem is going to become even worse, particularly in the metropolitan area, Mr. Speaker, where the vacancy rate is down to some 2.7%. It's impossible for those individuals to find decent, affordable housing. And the government must get back into the housing market, Mr. Speaker, and it must be prepared to address that very crucial area. Particularly in the metro area, as I've said, in the Antigonish area, the Kentville, Yarmouth area, there are some areas in which are in the very need of housing. And we need a housing that will benefit those individuals out there who are in the need for housing. And we're talking about, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about housing stock for seniors. We're talking about housing dwellings for single-family members. We're talking about housing dwellings that will meet the needs of disabled persons. And we're talking about housing that will meet the needs of persons with environmental illness. All that, Mr. Speaker, has not come to the fore under this government. And this government's been in office for some 5 years. The previous Liberal government has not attempted to address the issue of housing, and that's why we're in the sad state of housing in this province. There's a need, Mr. Speaker, to communicate and to talk to the advocacy groups once again, and to keep constant contact with the advocacy groups on the housing needs. And there are many individuals who are experts in this particular field who can certainly direct the government on how best to put those dollars to use in housing. I know that the provincial government, the Minister of Housing, signed this agreement in September of 2002. The minister has not decided where that $37.2 million is going to go over the 5-year period. There certainly is a need for us to know, and we need some sense of direction as to where the minister is going to spend these dollars. Also, Mr. Speaker, we need to know that there is the issue of disabled persons. I know that the Disabled Persons Commission, along with Leo, has consistently asked the Minister of Community Services to provide for a pilot project on technical aids. I know that my leader and myself and other members of this caucus has consistently asked the government to work on a pilot project for persons with disabilities, to provide them with technical aids, and even to allow them to be a participant and administer the program, so that they could be so that it would be an opportunity for employment, as well as that they would best know what kind of programs and services to provide. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that has been a request on the books since I've been here. There's also been a request on the books since I've been here for additional projects on homes for independent living. And I do know that there's one pilot project of a homes for independent living, but that's been going for some 10 years, and the government simply funded that, although there's been requests for additional projects in that particular area. That has not come to the fore yet, Mr. Speaker, and I don't even know where that is in the government's agenda, or where it is, or even if they've contemplated it being placed somewhere on their agenda. There's a whole host of needs around housing. We can talk about housing for persons with environmental illness. I do know that in Ottawa there's I don't know if it's a 20-unit project that's underway, and it's underway in cooperation with those individuals who have experienced environmental illness, and there's some 20 units being designed because of the varying degrees of environmental illness, and the number of groups and organizations that are involved came together with the government in Ottawa to do a project with respect to those individuals on environmental illness. And I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, that there have been a number of requests here in the metro area and in this province for persons with environmental illness to have the kind of shelter that they can be assured will not affect their health. And we do know, Mr. Speaker, that there are a number of those individuals whom, in fact, in this province as well, have a varying degree of environmental illnesses. And they've come together to ask the government to look at this issue. I believe right now there is a committee talking with the general manager of housing for the capital region, and I do know that they've tried to make some inroads with respect to that. I don't know how far they've gotten, but I haven't heard of anything with respect to commitments to the housing plan in this province. So I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if in fact there is anything at all on the board. The Minister of Housing Services says that he will be making those announcements as time progresses. Well, that simply isn't good enough for those individuals out there who are waiting. And as my colleague had indicated this morning, of the number of seniors housing, my colleague from Halifax Atlantic had indicated the number of seniors housing that have 2 and 3 stories that do not have elevators, and the kind of problem that poses to seniors who live in those seniors housing complex. It's just simply another one of those issues that government hasn't addressed. And I do know that my leader, the honourable colleague from Dartmouth Cold Harbour, has made requests with respect to Sarkisian Drive on having an elevator installed in the 2-story seniors complex there. It has not happened yet, Mr. Speaker. And under the Financial Measures Act, probably there is nothing in the budget. We don't know. We don't know what's in this budget unless, if there were a way to ferret it out, we might very well be able to find out, but we don't even know that. And the only other way we would know that is if in fact we had a line item budget book. And the line item budget book is not likely to come before this legislative assembly. So we have to sit back and we have to wait for the government to make these particular announcements as to when it's going to and how it's going to met out this $37.26 million. I would say to you, Mr. Speaker, the time is now, not during election time, to make those announcements on what it's going to do with respect to housing in this province. The government also knows that there's a need to address the rental supplements, the residential rehabilitation assistance program as well, Mr. Speaker. Many of these programs here, both the rental supplement, the residential rehabilitation assistance program, and the emergency fund, the dollars are run out before it even comes to the purse. And unfortunately, when people make requests, they tell them the money is not in the budget. And this is consistently happening year after year. So there needs to be additional dollars put there. We don't know how many additional dollars will be put into additional rent supplements in this province, Mr. Speaker. We don't know where they're going to be. I've said to the minister, we need to know. We need to know so that Nova Scotians, particularly in the metro area and other areas where there is a very low vacancy rate, need to know what they can rely upon their government with respect to housing, be that rental supplements, be that affordable housing. And another, again, Mr. Speaker, is the issue around the modest housing program. I must say that I'm pleased to see that the Minister of Housing Services has actually provided every member of the legislative assistance Legislative Assembly with, in fact, a copy of the modest housing program. It's the first time it's been done, Mr. Speaker, but it shouldn't only end up in this legislature. The modest housing program should also end up in the community, where organizations and advocacy groups act on behalf of those Nova Scotians needing shelter, so that those Nova Scotians who know that they might be able to access this modest housing program can have access to it. I was appalled, Mr. Speaker, when last year the former Minister of Community Services actually sold 2 of the modest homes rather than renovate them, repair them as housing stock, and put them back into the housing stock for the modest housing program. It's only this way, Mr. Speaker, that we are able to address the real issue of housing shortages in this province. We need to know how much money has come from the province since 1995 to this province, from that bag of money that's come down from the federal government when it got out of the housing business, and where that money is being spent. I've asked the minister for that information. It is yet to forthcome. We need to know where the government is going and what direction the minister is going to be taking with respect to new housing stock. I believe under the agreement there was a commitment made that there ought to be some 1,500 new units built in the province of Nova Scotia. Now, this agreement is spanned out over this $37.26 million, Mr. Speaker, is spanned out over a 5-year period. When you look how little that $37.2 million will do, we need to say that, look, this won't even address the issues of housing in the metropolitan area, let alone addressing the issue right across this province. And as more and more people migrate to the metro area, purely because of economics or purely because of the downturn in the economy in other parts of the province, and people migrating to where they know that the best opportunities for employment are, then that's going to happen, and it's going to put those pressures on. And as we can see in the outlying areas of this municipality, Mr. Speaker, the tremendous growth that's taking place in housing. But it doesn't address the needs of those individuals on low income. And back in 1993, I remember back actually further than that, in 1988, when in fact, Mr. Speaker, there was a move by municipal governments and provincial governments and the federal government to get out of the housing business. That in fact, it said the private sector could best provide the housing stock that was needed. The private sector hasn't been able to provide that housing stock. But there's absolutely no reason why we can't work with the private sector and building affordable housing stock for the community. We can certainly do that. But government must be the leader, and it must be prepared to take direction. It must be prepared to give direction, I should say, Mr. Speaker, on how we want the private sector to participate in the housing stock in this province and housing redevelopment. And I think there's an opportunity there for a partnership, providing, as I've said earlier, Mr. Speaker, that the provincial government, the Minister of Housing Services, takes the initiative to do that. Because if we see this continuous growth out there and the continuous pressures being placed on individuals whose budgets are fixed, both the seniors who are on a fixed income because they receive an old age income or a Canada pension, both those persons who are on income assistance because the budget's already allocated and slotted out to how much they will be able to pay for shelter based on the family size and based on one's disabilities or that, Mr. Speaker, is some of the criteria that we know that's out there, and we do know that that causes the pressures upon these individuals to compete in the housing market out there, to actually purchase shelter. Consistently, this is a very, very serious problem, and until we address this issue under the Financial Measures Act, Mr. Speaker, and through the department's budget, then I don't think that we're going to go very far on it. Certainly, another issue that comes to mind under the Financial Measures Act is, again, Mr. Speaker, is the government's intent to amend the Municipal Government Act of 1998 to deal with the casino issue on smoking. And Mr. Speaker, when the former government decided that the former Liberal government of the province decided that there would be a Municipal Government Act, an act of good government in Nova Scotia, it decided that it would allow the municipal government, even though it's here by the graces of the provincial government and it's not enshrined in the charter, to have a recognition that in fact it has some autonomy by allowing it to introduce bylaws that would have some strength and power. And as we know, most recently, the Halifax Regional Municipalities Council had taken advantage of that by introducing a bylaw for the cessation of smoking. And that meant that there would be a total ban on smoking in workplaces and in public places throughout the entire HRM. The Minister of Finance was quickly made aware that this would have an impact on the financial ability of the Halifax Casino, so intervened in introducing a piece of legislation through the Financial Measures Act to deal with the smoking cessation. The Minister knows very well that in fact that this is the harmful toxic and chemical substances that come from smoking. It's just one of the very reasons why many Canadians today, and in particular Nova Scotians, want a smoke-free environment. They want a smoke-free environment, Mr. Speaker, because they are more concerned today with health and safety of their own physical structures, as well as with their own physical being, as well as other Nova Scotians. And that in itself, Mr. Speaker, should send a signal to this provincial government that they better move forward with the times. And they better move forward to thinking of what the majority of Nova Scotians are saying with respect to a total ban on smoking, both in the workplace and in public places. All we have to do, Mr. Speaker, is if we don't recognize the causes that smoking creates, all we have to do is go to the palliative care unit and in any particular hospital here across the province. And if we go to a palliative care unit, we will see the causes that smoking has created on those individuals, Mr. Speaker. We will also see the kind of cost that it has produced to Nova Scotians through the health care budgets. It's one way to, and if we want to decrease the cost of health care in this province, we need to think about, Mr. Speaker, just exactly how we're going to do that. And one way to do that is simply by cessation of smoking. If we can get our public to cease smoking, and we're certainly going in that direction because I think it's the fourth or fifth time that the government has increased the cost of tobacco in this province. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that in itself has had an effect because the number of individuals who have quit smoking, I think, is on the rise. And that in itself will, in the future, save taxpayers dollars as a result of their health care budget. It'll make people healthier. It will prolong their life, and it will indeed save tremendous dollars in health care. The government, I guess, if it's concerned about this particular issue, then it needs to err on the side of Nova Scotians and not on the side of the casino. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about the Nova Scotia Power. Now, I know that the provincial government has talked about the Nova Scotia Power with respect to with respect to the Financial Measures Act. And this was a commitment based on the equalization payment under the former Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, and Municipal Relations. And that was a way to provide the equalization payment across this province. And Nova Scotia Power, as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, although it was endorsed at the time by the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities, as this was a way to go to provide, rather than the government put up front, additional dollars to equalization payments to the municipalities, that the government would in turn seek more grant dollars from the Nova Scotia Power Corporation, which is a private corporation, although it doesn't pay real property tax, pays a grant in lieu of. And the grant in lieu of, apparently, according to the government, is supposed to somewhat reflect the real property, the tax that the Nova Scotia Power Corporation would pay. Having said that, they're going to take this money and met it out across the province to those municipalities who, through an equalization payment. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, those municipalities who are the host communities of power plants, such as Point of Coney, such as the former city of Dartmouth, the community of Dartmouth now, and I've always been a firm believer that the host community should be the recipient and the benefit of the tax dollars from the corporations, particularly in property tax dollars. And this is what I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker, it's a property tax dollar. And Dartmouth has never been the benefit of those real dollars, and I can tell you that they would benefit now the HRM, if in fact HRM were to be the benefactor of those additional dollars. I don't know what that in turn would mean to the Halifax Regional Municipality in additional revenue, but I'm safe to say it's somewhere around $2 to $5 million additional dollars that would be to the coffer of the Halifax Regional Municipality as a result of the Nova Scotia Power Corporation, if the corporation were to pay real property tax and pay it to the coast community in which it exists. Mr. Speaker, here again would be additional dollars that would be able to be used and spent by the host community that has the Power Corporation in place in its area. While serving in Dartmouth City Council, Mr. Speaker, I've consistently argued that that the Power Corporation should be paying real property tax, and that it should not be paying a grant in lieu of. And now that it's a private corporation, it's all the more reason why it should be paying a real property tax, and it's all the more reason why that real property tax should be paid to the host community. The host communities would benefit greatly. I'm not sure that the town of Guysborough would appreciate if, in fact, we were to collect tax dollars from the fractionation plant and the gas plant in Guysborough and met that out over the entire, through an equalization payment over the entire province. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that would not be something that they would appreciate, and rightly so. Rightly so. I don't think that that's the way to go, and I think the way to go is that when, in fact, you have the opportunity to extract tax dollars from a real property base, that you, as a municipal unit, you should be entitled to do that. Unfortunately, I don't see this happening, and I do see that this is going to increase over the next few years up until, I believe, 2004, 2005. It's going to increase by an additional $10.7 million starting January 1. And again on January the 1, $15.5 million starting on January the 1st, 2004. Those additional dollars will then be put in to the government's purse to provide for an equalization payment. Mr. Speaker, again, I think that there's certainly something wrong with this direction, and my understanding is that, in fact, Mr. Speaker, there may be some municipalities who are members of the UNSM who might very well be opposing this direction. Not sure, but they certainly are seriously considering and thinking of rather government just simply shouldn't get back into the business of providing the equalization payments and that the host communities be the recipient of the Nova Scotia Power Corporation dollars. It's also, the budget hasn't stated or did much with respect to the Department of Natural Resources and why we are not benefiting, Mr. Speaker, from, the mining resources, the forestry, and the offshore oil. And Mr. Speaker, it's time that Nova Scotians benefited from those particular natural resources. It's unfortunate that I can sit here at my home in Dartmouth North and watch a train travel from the Gibson area through to Wrights Cove, and I can watch those train loads of gypsum go through, and it goes through to Youngstown, Virginia, and it's about 12 cents a ton under an agreement. And then it's sent back to us as a manufactured good in the form of sheetrock, which every one of us build our homes in, Mr. Speaker. I find that a most unusual waste. I should say not a waste, but a most unusual way to expend of one's natural resources, where we don't get the value added by generating a plant here in Nova Scotia, creating employment for people, and in fact, making sure that we have that value-added process here. And there's no reason why we can't do that, Mr. Speaker. I believe that it's also happening by Georgia Pacific on Cape Breton Island as well, that in fact the gypsum is being shipped out to two parts of the United States and being manufactured and sent back to us as a manufactured good. Each of these natural resources, Mr. Speaker, could generate additional dollars for the government, whom in fact would not necessarily have to turn around and impose user fees and and place the unnecessary burden upon those individuals who can least afford to pay the taxes. Mr. Speaker, in my last few remaining minutes, I want to go back to the $155 that's going to come through the mailbox of many Nova Scotians. I just want this government to realize that there are some 433,000 Nova Scotians who will be the benefit of that $155 tax rebate. But there will be some 300,000 Nova Scotians who will not benefit from that $155 tax rebate. Those 300,000 Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, would have done a much better job of making that money flow through the economy, because those individuals would have spent that money, Mr. Speaker, into the local businesses. The local businesses then would have been able to generate and sustain themselves and pass those dollars back on to the provincial government in the form of tax dollars. The cycle of those dollars would have been much better spent, Mr. Speaker, by making sure that more money had gone into the hands of those Nova Scotians who least can afford to spend those very few dollars that they have now. It's that, Mr. Speaker, that we need to think about when we met out taxpayers' dollars. And if, Mr. Speaker, we are going to met out taxpayers' dollars and everyone's going to benefit from the spoils of this government and making sure that we see a balanced budget, Mr. Speaker, then we need to make sure that everyone benefits from it. And every one of us, there's 52 members of this Legislative Assembly, Mr. Speaker, will be going out on the doorstep this year in an election campaign. You can be rest assured, when we hit the doorstep, each of us 52 members of this Legislative Assembly will have to answer to those 300,000 Nova Scotians who will not see a paycheck coming through their mailbox. We need to know that, Mr. Speaker. And we need to know that in rural communities where many people on fixed incomes live, many people who are seniors, many people who receive disability benefits and so on and live in those rural communities who will need those additional tax rebate dollars will not get it. And when those members of this Legislative Assembly canvass in those rural constituencies, they better be very much aware that Nova Scotians know that they will not be the recipient of those individual tax dollars. Mr. Speaker, I know my time's coming to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to Bill 36. It was I was greatly honored by a caucus and all the fine words that are being said on my retirement. I don't recall. Thank you again, and I don't recall that sort of a reception when I was elected, but as soon as you announce retirements, then you become a senior statesperson and all the others. But no, seriously, if I could, Mr. Speaker, just express my appreciation for the kindness of all members of the House this morning. I'd like to particularly thank the member from Dartmouth North for the kindness of his words, and I'm going to cut out Hansard and hold that forever, and visit him in Dartmouth North once in a while with all the nice things he said about me. But seriously, so I won the prize, really. I get to stay till 2 o'clock today and speak for our caucus time. So that's, while the pleasantries were exchanged, then it seems like, although you're not supposed to mention the absence or presence of members of the House necessarily, or particularly the absence, then so I shan't do that. But I seem to have I've inherited the cleanup spot for us today. So I'll make a few general comments on the second reading on this Financial Measures Act, this enabling legislation for the budget. And this is sort of a kingpin fulcrum point for the budget to turn on to enable the budget to achieve the goals. Which some people, we had a debate, Mr. Speaker, that I think you were in the chair at the time, the other evening on April the 30th, where we did debate the social fairness, the tax relief program, particular part of this Bill 36, the section that deals with tax relief. And we debated the social fairness and the economic effectiveness of that. Whole debate, or the tax relief. But the bill itself is an enabling legislation that deals initially with the apprenticeship issues that's so important in Trades and Qualifications Act in the first section. We've expressed our continued concern about the increased fees and for training, examinations, and for certifications within the apprenticeship programs. But at the same time, paying tribute to the great work that's being done within the community college. Certainly was a priority of our government prior to this government's mandate, and they have continued, and in many ways, particularly under the strong leadership of the community colleges, we see that I think not only the well-functioning community college system, because we had a lot of catching up to do throughout this country, that we have been able to address the needs such as the offshore that has changed. So while a lot of the programs were more traditional, and at the trades level, now they're highly skilled. You have people with university degrees that are going into the community colleges. So our plea is that we just don't price that group. I think many of those people are more vulnerable in many ways than the university group, and we see many people not able to reach, due to financial reasons, reach the university level, and they are capable of doing that, but for financial reasons are unable to access a university education. We don't want to see that happen at the community college level and in those involved with apprenticeship programs. Many of them are single mothers who have come back into training programs. They've gone through upgrading, and they are the more vulnerable of our society, and we must support that. So a few $100s in some of those programs can make a big difference, Mr. Speaker, as you well know. Then moving along, we talk about the equity tax credit in Part 2, and I try not to be too specific. Then the area that catches attention, particularly this week, with the judgment coming down under the EI program with secondhand smoke ruling that has been addressed by other members of this legislature this week, the Gaming Control Act under Part 3 of Bill 36, the Financial Measures Act. And I think this has really highlighted the changing times. The government continually speaks in terms of our government not moving forward, and there are things that we wanted to do, particularly in a minority government, that we never really had the permission of the other groups in the legislature to do that, and to bring forward legislation that's maybe on the cutting edge. But recognizing that the workplace issues, the decision of the EI, and I hope it's a message that rings through other areas, health and safety, that will not override that decision, but that this is a recognized health issue, that is a workplace issue. We have, prior to the announcement of this decision this week, we particularly had a group of vocal physicians and other healthcare workers in the Cape Breton area that really spoke out very clearly and asking this government not to use Bill 36 to override a bylaw of the municipal units, both in the Cape Breton municipal unit and the HRM, not to override those legislations. That these two communities, particularly in Cape Breton, that has led the way with 100% banning smoking in public places, has really spoken out. And they are creatures of the province. They are impacted, can be impacted very easily by their own legislation, can be overruled by a stroke of the pen here in this legislature by this government. So our plea on behalf of those physicians like Dr. Andrew Link and others in the Cape Breton area that have spoken out so clearly, we add our voice and we thank them for their crusade. This is not something is a fly-by-night. They have visited here in this law amendments committee. They have spoken out clearly, and they brought the message from their own community that the people in their area are very supportive, and they've shown the way on the anti-smoking campaign and education and public awareness issues, and they want support, and they don't want this part of the bill to be used and to overturn bylaws in the municipal unit. Because we know from the contract at the casinos that the smoking is not mentioned, and that's been very clearly. So while it's pretty clear that it could well be used for that, that our concern is not only on the smoking issue, but it may well impact on other bylaws that the city itself may want to bring in that would impact on the casino as well. So we don't know. It's an open-ended, it's far too wide, and while it would be ill-advised to cave in and wave the white flag, and already the finance minister has spoken in terms of a material breach, and given the signal that this government is prepared to lay down and under the section's operator termination events, and go and sort of give up the government's position, telegraph it out initially, and cave in to the operators of the casino. So what on a first blush may look like it's strategic legislation, Mr. Speaker, it really is very basic to the rules of governance and who is responsible. That the bylaws of the HRM and Cape Breton area have spoken clearly. They're trying to do what's right. They're trying to do what's right for workers that are in the workplace, the same as if there are safety harnesses or other matters were faulty, were threatening their lives. It's now pretty clear. Research has spoken, and it's clear that there is no question anymore, it's not open for argument, that secondhand smoke kills. And we're now seeing bit by bit appeal decisions and decisions rendered. So times have changed dramatically, and the people deserve and they want protection in their workplace and children and others need it in their homes and in the automobiles that they drive in. And those are matters. There's still lots of work to do. But as I said, times have changed even over the last couple years. The courts have spoken in many areas relative to the habits and the works of the large tobacco companies. And I don't think this government needs to be partners with the large tobacco companies. But I'm sure the large tobacco companies are very pleased to see this legislation here under Part 3, the Gaming Control Act, but it's really enabling legislation that would allow this government to allow the abuse of workers within casinos and probably other areas as well that would be allowed to have unhealthy workplaces. So they say the Sydney doctors particularly have spoken out, and they asked the province to stand up and be counted and not to be pushed around or intimidated by big tobacco companies and casino operators. And Dr. Link himself, he said the medical staff in Sydney believes the province will not be defeated in the courts or suffer financial penalties by doing the right thing and protecting Nova Scotia's health. And when you're doing the right thing, Mr. Speaker, experience in this legislature and other places will tell you very clearly that in the long run, if you're doing what's right, it'll see you through. And that is clear. So we have the physicians that are speaking out, and I know that several months ago, Dr. Link took time off from his busy practice to appear before law amendments, and others. He was joined by others here, respiratory specialists that very graphically showed us slides of the damage that can be done by smoking, the ultimate cancers that often occur, and so the message is clear. And it's fine to blame the contract that was signed by a previous government. I think that on the surface can seem to be smart politics, Mr. Speaker, but it's not the way to do business, because this government has a responsibility to the people of this province to challenge the operators, to prove that there's a negative impact on there, and just to call their hand and see what sort of a game of poker they are playing. And the feeling of the physicians that they will, in fact, this government would win in the courts should it find its way there. It probably wouldn't even find its way there, Mr. Speaker. So I'm getting some signals that maybe it's time to...
motion to adjourn debate would be in order.
Adjournment. If you would accept that, I would like so move. Thank you.
The motion is to adjourn debate on Bill 36. Is the House agreed? Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader on Monday's hours and order of business.
The House will now rise to meet again on Monday at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit from 2 p.m. till 10 p.m. And the order of business following the daily routine will be public bills for second reading, commencing with Bill 36, and then carrying on with Bill number 1, 2, etc. If you wish, certainly. On Tuesday, we'll sit from 12 until 8, and on Thursday, we'll sit from 12 until 8, and on Wednesday, we'll probably sit from 2 to 6, unless the opposition would like to give us additional time, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The House adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The House is adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday.